Arizona. This effort, the Four Corners Wind Resource Center, is an educational effort. It is funded by the U.S. Department of Energy through the Wind Exchange Program. We have a full website that has a lot of materials that we'd like to commend to you about wind energy. And our center is available to anybody in the Four Corners Wind Resource area, as well as the states of Nevada and Wyoming. So we are going to have 3 presentations on this webinar today. The webinar is going to be recorded, and it is going to be posted after the fact in case you'd like to go back to it. It is posted on our website, which is fourcornerswind.org. We are going to have each presenter give about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes worth of presentation material. If we have time at the end of each presentation, we will take some questions. So if you have questions that you think of during the presentation, please feel free to write them into the chat box, and we will read them off the screen. Or we will also unmute people and then ask if people have questions so they can ask their own questions. So to introduce the topic, we are seeing a tremendous amount of change in the electricity industry. We've got new technologies that we've never had that are shaping the way that we're building our electric systems. We have more distributed energy systems than we've ever had, and those are changing both the distribution system and somewhat the transmission system. And then we have new regulations that are going to affect what type of generation we're going to choose in the future. So we have the Clean Power Plan, we have mercury rules, we have ozone rules, a lot of different regulations that are shaping the electric industry. So when we look out into the future and we see that we're going to have a different generation mix, we also see that we're going to need some different systems in place to help make sure that we can manage the system and keep it cost effective and reliable. And that might be new markets, it may be new market tools, it may be new strategies. And that's what we really want to talk about today. We want to be able to present to you a lot of what's happening in the Western interconnection so you have a basis for thinking about wind energy and wind energy integration. So we have 3 terrific speakers I'm so pleased to have. First is Don Fuller. Don is the Director of Strategic Alliances at the California Independent System Operator. He is going to talk about the CAISO market because it is the only organized market within the Western interconnection and how it operates and what the energy imbalance market is. Then we're going to transition to Commissioner Rebecca Wagner, who's with the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. She's also the chair of the Energy Imbalance Market Transitional Committee, and she's going to talk to us about how the governance structure is emerging to deal with other states outside of California and other utilities outside of California playing in a market tool. And then we're going to close out with Kevin Lynch, who's the Managing Director of External Affairs for Iberdrola Renewables. Kevin's going to talk to us about what does this all mean for wind energy. If we know we're going to have more clean energy on our system, why do we care about an energy imbalance market? Why do we care about markets in general? And how will these developments help smooth and lower the cost of integration? What we hope is that you come away with a better understanding of how energy markets work in the Western interconnection and then how these markets support clean energy. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our first speaker, to Don. So Don, I think you have controls and you can take it away.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and thanks to all of you listening in this afternoon. What I wanted to do was walk through a little bit, kind of an overview of the energy imbalance market, what it is, talk a little bit about the benefits as we see them, but also from the viewpoint of the entities that have decided to join. And then I'll finish up with some comments on what may be next for the energy imbalance market. So right now I'm going to test to see if I can control the slides. And so far, it's not working. So I'm going to need some help with these slides, I think.
Okay.
I need to go back to slide 3, if you could.
I wonder if that was you, it was just delayed.
No. Oh, maybe it was. Okay. By the way, for those of you in the audience, I've watched this tested, and so the issues here are the operator here, myself, and not the system. First, I just wanted to touch on the overall markets that the ISO operates. We operate what's referred to as an integrated market, which means we have a full day-ahead market that procures energy, ancillary services, residual capacity if needed. And we also run a real-time market that covers an hour-ahead scheduling and a 15-minute market, and also a 5-minute economic dispatch. And I wanted to just kind of give you the broader picture, because when we talk about the energy imbalance market, we're really capturing the 15-minute market and the 5-minute dispatch and making that part of the market available to other entities, to other balancing areas outside of the ISO. And so that's really the basis of our energy imbalance market that I'll be talking about. You know, when we talk about balancing and the need and the value of an energy imbalance market, it's interesting to look at, I think we now have 38 balancing areas across the West, and to a large extent, those balancing areas, as they get into real time and are faced with how to balance resources and load, they tend to do it within their own balancing area because there aren't as good a market and the ability to go out to other balancing areas as they get into real time. And it causes some inefficiencies. Also, in many cases, those intra-hour dispatches occur manually, not in all cases, but probably in most. And what we're doing with the energy imbalance market is really, we're doing a single look at the ISO and the EIM entities together. We're looking at imbalances across the entire EIM footprint, and we're also looking across the footprint for resources that have made themselves available to be dispatched in real time to help make up the differences. And so it gives us a lot more economic dispatch, but at the same time helps us get at a wider diversity of resources. And I'll show in a couple slides how that works. Starting on page 5, I would direct your attention to the map, which I would add we're very happy and proud of in terms of the progress that EIM has made. It shows both Pacific Corp that's now in operation. It shows NV Energy, which will go into operation this fall. We're actually due to start market simulation work with NV Energy next month. And also the recent additions of Puget Sound Energy in Washington and also Arizona Public Service, both of whom will go operational and participate beginning October of 2016. When we started on the energy imbalance market, it actually goes back a little over 3 years ago in an effort that Rebecca and possibly many of you in the audience were involved with the PUC EIM group. We came up with an approach to try to provide an energy imbalance market using our existing platform. That gave us several benefits. One of which was the fact that it makes the energy imbalance market very scalable. And I think as you look at how the map has progressed, it really has shown how important that scalability is, that people can enter when and if they desire, but can enter on their own schedule. Also, because we're working off of the existing market platform that we have, it presents really a low-cost option to participate. and a low risk. We have no exit fee if people decide, we hope this doesn't happen, but if people decide after they've chosen to operate an EIM that it does not have the benefit for them for some reason, there is a provision of no exit fees. The last bullet here I wanted to spend just a few moments on because I think it's very important. We've talked about this a lot, but I still find that there's a misunderstanding around what EIM is, but also what it isn't. And it's important to note that each of these balancing areas, as they choose to join EIM, maintain their own autonomy, they maintain their compliance obligations, they maintain the final responsibility for the actual balancing, for procurement of operating reserves, and they control which units that they may own, if that's the case, that actually are moved around by way of the bids that they provide into the marketplace. Again, just wanted to emphasize that the balancing areas do maintain their autonomy even while participating in the energy imbalance market. I thought I'd spend just a minute on the four entities that have made the decision to join EIM. I've shown them in this slide 6. The line called annual benefits was a result of in-depth cost-benefit analysis and studies that were done individually for all four of these entities. And again, it did look at the specifics of their balancing area and their balancing area participation in EIM. And you see that the numbers vary. Some of the criteria were written differently for each of them. But I think that the key takeaway from this slide is twofold. One is when you start looking at these costs and the ongoing costs compared to these benefits, you see that most of these folks saw a payback of their investment in a very short period of time. And the other thing I did want to mention that's not shown here is that in all of these cases, there were, by a new entity being added to EIM, there was significant benefit to their own customers and also at the same time benefits to the rest of the existing EIM participants, if you will. So really a win-win for everybody. I'm on to slide 7 now, and what this slide shows is our first 5 months of operation with PacifiCorp. Overall, it has been very successful. We did have some pricing issues up front that have been resolved, and what we're trying to show here is what we're doing now on a quarterly basis. We will put out a report that looks at calculating the actual benefits that occurred and actually split up also by balancing area. So you'll see on this chart it actually reflects the calculated benefits to ISO customers. And these benefits are calculated in a similar way but using actual data, but similar to the cost-benefit studies that were done by each of the four entities as part of their decision to join EIM. And you know, they reflect a more efficient dispatch that I mentioned earlier, and a more efficient dispatch in two ways. One, within their own balancing area, but also more efficient dispatch between the balancing areas. One of the other benefits is reduced flexibility reserves, and a key benefit that we're all interested in is the ability of EIM to reduce renewable energy curtailments. And I think I've got that covered in a subsequent slide, but you know, it's key to note that what we have found already with PacifiCorp is a significant amount of transfers that are occurring from south to north. They typically are occurring at times when we're entering or we're into an oversupply situation. At those times, the prices in our market go very low. And so what some of this benefit reflects is the fact that PacifiCorp may be taking advantage of inexpensive energy that's available within the California market. But this also talks to a really key topic as we go forward in time and we have a higher portfolio of renewables. We have an increased opportunity to be in an oversupply situation, which sometimes would put us in a situation of curtailing some of these resources. EIM helps find a home for that extra resource, which is a key benefit that we see with the energy imbalance market. I think one more very important point here is that we were very pleased as we look across the first 5 months of operation and the benefits here that total $11.2 million over 5 months. Very important point that these have collaborated. They've kind of confirmed the benefit study that were done prior to operation. So we're very pleased to see that the actual benefits are coming out consistent with what was calculated in the earlier cost-benefit studies. This next slide deserves just a couple pieces of explanation. The green bars that you see are transfers from PacifiCorp to the ISO. The blue bars that are extending downward reflect transfers from south to north, essentially from the ISO back up to PacifiCorp. And again, these are taking advantage of, to a large extent, not solely, but to a large extent of inexpensive energy that's been available here. But we're happy to see that not only are we seeing the benefits, but we're getting transfers as a result of EIM in both directions. This next slide, some of you may have seen, again, deserves just a little bit of explanation. We have been doing some studies at the request of the state, and this one shows a scenario around a 40% renewable standard out in 2024. Again, this is just a study. But each of the dots on this chart represent some period during an hour where it appeared, according to the study, with business as usual, that there would be an oversupply situation that would likely result in a curtailment. And I want to emphasize the business as usual because we're not planning to operate in business as usual mode. We really look at this as an opportunity to find ways to adapt to these RPS standards in an economic way and at the same time with a goal of reducing to the extent possible the need for any curtailments of equipment. But as you look at possible solutions, you know, there are a wide range of them. Some of them under the ISO control, some of them part of state, potentially even federal policy, but a whole look at solutions, energy efficiency. I think many of you know that storage is getting a lot of attention and commitment here in California. You know, there's a look at what can be done with transportation fuels, retrofitting existing power plants to make them more flexible, more able to respond in real time. Time of use rates, which is ongoing now in the PUC. And this last bullet, deepen regional coordination, our answer to that right now is the energy imbalance market. But I wanted to mention the energy imbalance market can help extensively in this. It is not the only tool, and we are encouraging development of all of the tools. Again, looking at this chart as an opportunity to find new ways to run the grid and new ways to operate to accommodate the higher renewable portfolios. So I think I'm getting somewhere close to my my allotted time here, and I just wanted to finish with a slide. I'm often asked, well, what's next for EIM? We're continuing a stakeholder process for what we've called Year 1 enhancements to EIM. Part of that has been completed. Some of it addressed issues that FERC directed us to do when they first approved the EIM. Some of it has been done to improve the scalability of EIM and also to address some issues that we found which can be expected during the early startup. The phase 2 that is shown here has been kicked off. One of the key topics it will address is how should we on a long-term basis price the use of the transmission system for EIM. And I know that will be a key topic for many entities in the West. The second bullet here gets at a question that I've been asked frequently, and I think you're all aware of a recent announcement that Pacific Corp and the ISO have undertaken a study to look at the possibility and the feasibility of Pacific Corp joining the ISO as a full participant. And so the question I get is, well, what does that have to do with EIM? And first, I would say that, as you look at this map and the 8 states that ultimately will be covered by these 4 entities, I go back to a point I made earlier. We're doing a single optimization across all these areas simultaneously every 5 minutes. And so whether Pacific Corp is a participant in EIM or whether they have an increased participation, the impact, the benefits to the other EIM entities are not changed. And I think on top of that, we remain, and Pacific Corp remains committed to the long-term success of EIM. And that said, the work underway is just still a study of feasibility. But key there, particularly for the entities that have decided to join, the benefits that have been calculated on behalf of their customers do not change depending on the outcome of this study that's underway. So the other question I get a lot is, who's next? Will additional entities join? And I have the opportunity to work in secret a lot, because a lot of people, as they undergo these studies, want to be very watchful of the study and being able to communicate properly to their regulators or to their controlling body, whatever that is. But there are other entities that are undergoing specific cost-benefit studies in their area, and of course we're hoping that EIM will continue to expand, because it continues to bring benefits for all customers in the process. So with that, I will pause here and thank you, and maybe take a half a minute to introduce the next topic which I wasn't asked to do, but I'm going to anyway. Because, you know, as you look at this map, one of the key questions that has come up from these entities and people across the West is energy imbalance looks good, has good benefits, but how do I ensure that I have a real voice in decisions down the road? And we have been very fortunate to have a group of 12 industry leaders across the West that are helping tackle that problem. And really a very good group of leaders. And actually both Rebecca and Kevin are a part of that group, and we appreciate the work they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. We will have time at the end to take questions of Don, and I just want to remind people that we will unmute the phones at the end to ask questions. But if you'd raise your little hand on the webinar to let us know you have a question, we will take those and the questions that are written in the text box at the very end. So we have Commissioner Rebecca Wagner with us, who's going to talk about what Don said she's going to talk about. Commissioner.
Great. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for the intro, Don. Very kind of you. First, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is obviously becoming a topic of great interest throughout the West as more states move towards participating. So I especially want to thank the Four Corners Wind Resource Center for hosting this, and to Amanda for including me. I always have to start off any presentation with a disclaimer that anything that's said is my opinion, not the opinion of the Commission, nor is it the opinion of the Transitional Committee. And because one of my colleagues on the Transitional Committee is on here, he'll correct anything that I say or I mess up. What I'm going to walk through today is just a quick overview of the Transitional Committee, what we're doing. I'll discuss governance, our approach to establishing a governance structure, and how that has translated into our straw proposal. And then, like Don, I'll offer a few comments about the Pacific Core ISO study. So the Transitional Committee was created by the ISO board a year ago, and they created a charter, and the charter specifies our nominating process, who participates, and basically what our charges are. And the two roles of the advisory committee, or I'll just refer to us as the committee, is to advise the board on matters related to the final testing and early operational phases of EIM. Those are market design issues. We have a market design working group that are specifically looking at the year one enhancements, and if it's necessary for our group to comment, and we haven't at this point, but we are monitoring those closely. And then the primary focus of our discussion today is around the role of governance, and the board gave us the charge to develop a proposal for a long-term EIM governance structure with specific defined authority over EIM on a going-forward basis. Pursuant to the charter, the committee is currently comprised of 13 members selected through a nomination and appointment process. The original group was selected by a sector nominating process, and then the EIM entities, which now total 4, are Pacific Core, NV Energy, Puget Sound, and Arizona Public Service. And as of last Friday, Brad Albert from APS is our newest representative on the committee. So the committee has been working together and through its working groups for about a year, and we've developed and posted an issue paper and a straw proposal. The issue paper was published in January, and it was our first shot at testing our ideas about where governance could or should go. We received a robust set of comments, and we took those comments and used them to inform our straw proposal, which was posted for public comment on March 19th. We've received, again, a robust set of comments, and largely seeking clarification and a better understanding of how this will work. And that was generally anticipated by the committee, because we have to start somewhere. So we started big, and now we are defining, refining, and adding clarity around those the issues of the straw proposal. And again, we are right in the midst of our next revision to the straw proposal, and that's expected to be posted for feedback on June 22nd. And then we'll have our official rollout stakeholder meeting, and to coincide with our committee's meeting June 25th in Reno. So what the committee, based on our research through the help of the ISO staff, we spent a lot of time, essentially the first 6 months, or the second 6 months of last year, trying to understand, okay, what can we design, what are our parameters, and what have other markets, how have they organized. And what we arrived at after this consideration is, I got ahead of myself on my slide, sorry. We looked at three items. We either a purely advisory model, an autonomous separate entity model, and a delegated authority model. And essentially the challenge of governance in this instance is striking the right balance between regional governance for EIM, which is a regional market, but it is within a broader market that is managed by the ISO and subject to appointees from the California governor. So, you know, how do we strike the right balance, recognizing the need for regionality, but under the confines of California state law? The charter gave us some direction on what we should be pursuing, and the charter envisions members of the new EIM governing body who are independent from EIM market participants. So there's no financial conflict. So you wouldn't have someone serving on the board that also is a financial beneficiary because they work for an EIM entity. A meaningful and clear role for the EIM body. So under the model we ultimately selected, which is a delegated authority, what roles do we have, what responsibilities would the governing body have, and what decision-making authority would be there. Clearly, a nimble and efficient decision-making was one of the fundamentals, and probably one of the most important fundamentals has been the attempt to avoid dual filings at FERC. We see how it could be problematic if the EIM governing body develops some market rules and that are not consistent with the ISO, and we end up having two filings at FERC that are in conflict. So the Transitional Committee considered the three conceptual models. The pure advisory model would serve just as an advisory committee to the board, and the perception and the comments that we received and what we concluded is that that type of model wasn't going to instill a lot of confidence in the governance model, and it could be a barrier to broader participation in the market. So there would be like no teeth. So I don't think that would have been satisfactory, certainly for the regulators who, such as my state, which we approved the NV Energy participating in EIM, just in an advisory role for governance would not have been sufficient for us. On the other end of that spectrum would be an autonomous separate entity model, and we looked at that, and that would be a new company outside of the ISO that operates essentially completely independently. There's a number of issues with that, one of which is it it's somewhat incompatible with how the EIM is currently structured, and it ultimately could undermine the value proposition. So, for instance, NV Energy, I'll use that because that's the entity that I get to regulate. If they enter in, the commission gives approval, here's the budget amount, we have a certain set of expectations and a level of certainty that we know what we're getting into. If the governance model were to split off into a separate entity, we start losing that certainty, and what additional costs would there be to start up a brand new company, and how would that work? So that was problematic for many of us on the transitional committee, particularly because the whole intent of an energy imbalance market is the value proposition, is to optimize systems. So that almost becomes counterintuitive if you start incurring additional costs just to get to some level of autonomy. So what we tried to do is find, I guess would be the Goldilocks, what's in the middle, what's just right. So based on the stakeholder feedback, most support was around what we're referring to as the delegated authority model. And so I'll go through kind of the highlights of why we think that this is the best model. It would give the new EIM governing body delegated authority from board and with primary authority over anything specific to EIM market rules. So we're referring to it as the but-for test, so that if it exists solely because EIM exists, then that would be under the purview of the it would also serve as a formal advisory role to the ISO board on market rules that affect EIM but are not specific or unique to EIM. This would, we're envisioning a governing body that still utilizes the same stakeholder process, so we'll have significant ability to reach out and understand the effects of any decision on market design and market rules we'll have within the EIM footprint. And one of the most important parts of this delegated authority model is that it promotes close collaboration among all interests, but specifically we're trying to develop a model that is creates a collaborative working environment between the ISO board and the new EIM governing body. We don't want to have situations where the EIM governing body has a proposal for submission to FERC that the ISO board disagrees with. So we're working through the details of that for our next revision, but essentially to create a situation where the two bodies are working together and there's enough clear lines of separation of authority to understand who has what role, and then how to resolve any issues if there's differences of opinion. So our straw proposal was issued on March 19th. In the straw proposal, we explain the rationale for arriving at the delegated authority model. We explain why, in greater detail than I just did, why the limitations of the other two models. We discuss the concept of the nominating committee. Obviously, that's going to be a very important function of who has a say and who is appointed to this board. And we're currently debating, who participates, but right now it's envisioned that it would be obviously the EIM entities participating, entities serving load in the ISO, balancing authority, suppliers of generation in the EIM footprint, and publicly owned utilities in the EIM footprint. Potentially having a regulator have a voting role on that, and then having some non-voting members to provide context or information about how the ISO is operated, so perhaps an ISO board member. So we're working through those issues on the composition of the nominating committee. I'm going to skip the next bullet and go to along the lines of important functions. We've proposed the concept of establishing an advisory committee of state regulators, and which would be regulators who have EIM entities in their footprint or in their jurisdiction. And we've also considered how to incorporate representatives from publicly owned utilities. And it's, it's challenging to draw that distinction because obviously they're regulated in a different manner. So would it be a city council person? Would it be a board member from the Public Utility District Board? So we're working through those concepts as we move down the road of revising the straw proposal. And finally, with the straw proposal contains a section regarding the establishment of a mechanism for reevaluation of EIM governance. And so what we proposed was a series of triggers. So, when do we need to re-examine governance? And we generally arrived at 5 years automatically. That should give the EIM body enough time to grow, understand its dynamics before it has to engage in a governance review. But some of the other triggers are number of EIM entities. I don't know that there's any magical number, but at some point, if there's a significant number, do we need to look at governance again? So there's a list of those, but they run along the lines of number of large utilities. So it could be footprint or it could be density of population of the entities. And one of the triggers, which is kind of interesting, was the condition where a new entity joins the ISO as a full participating transmission owner. So we have not actually hit that yet, but clearly PacifiCorp's announcement to study the feasibility of joining the ISO as a full member, that's one of our triggers, and we're almost there right now. So, that we're reevaluating our triggers to make sure what makes sense, and we're finding that it's moving quicker than we thought. So that's an interesting point that we'll be working on. And with respect to the PacifiCorp announcement, I think it certainly took me by surprise. Not so much that it happened, that just how quickly it happened. And the transitional committee we had to spend some time really thinking this through. What does it mean? What does it not mean? And at our last meeting, we arrived at the conclusion that until the ISO Board of Governors tells us differently, we'll stay the course. But largely, we need to have some governance structure in place ahead of that. So, sooner rather than later, especially with a number of states involved in this, we've decided it's best to stay the course. And quite frankly, PacifiCorp has to get PUC approval in all of the states it operates in, and that's challenging. And to ultimately change the governance of the ISO will require a change in legislation in California. So I'm not sure how the California legislature works, and I'm sure it couldn't be any more functional than the Nevada legislature. So that I think would be it's a challenge in and of itself. So in the meantime, there's a lot of moving parts there. We need, for those states that are not engaged in that, we need to have some kind of governance proposal and structure in place as we move forward. On my last slide here, well, obviously we're going to pause the questions at the end, but I just kind of kept this at a very high level. We have the issue paper that we posted in January is a really good source to understand the three models that we were looking at and why. And then the straw proposal that was issued on March 19th really gives an explanation of, in-depth explanation of where we landed. And then the next revision of the straw proposal will go into into greater detail. And we continue to fine-tune around the concept of delegated authority. So with that, I will turn over the reins to my colleague, Kevin Lynch from Iberdrola, a hard-working member of our transitional committee, and always laughs at my really bad jokes. So turn it over to Kevin.
Well, thanks, Rebecca, and good afternoon to everybody. Just two notes. First of all, Rebecca, you got nothing wrong that I can correct in your presentation. So your request for me to do that is completely fulfilled without me having to say anything else. Very, very well done on the governance stuff. It's been a fascinating exercise. And the second note is this is going to be a slide-free presentation, so I'm just going to talk for a while. If that's all right. I developed an allergy to doing PowerPoint presentations recently, and I thought it'd be just more interesting to describe in a narrative form what's of interest to this developer and operator of primarily of renewable energy projects across the U.S. and in the West as this energy imbalance market starts to take shape. And I will try to speak quickly in order to allow us all, or you all, to ask the three of us any questions that we will then attempt to answer. So just by way of background, Iberdrola Renewables has about 6.5 gigawatts of electric generation operating in the U.S. About 6 gigawatts of that is considered renewable, primarily wind with a little bit of solar, and we also control or manage some biomass generation. About 30% of that or so is in the WEC, and I was trying to count the number of different balancing authorities that are facilities that we either own or control are in across the WEC, and I think I stopped at 7. So of the 38 or so BAs in the WEC that Don Fuller mentioned at the outset, we have an operating presence in about 20% of them. The bulk of our generation in the West, though, is in the Bonneville Power Administration's BA, and we can talk about that a bit. I will talk about that a bit toward the end of my presentation. But we're also present in the CAISO and in Arizona, Colorado, and in Pacific Corp's Eastern BA in southwestern Wyoming, where we control the output of a wind project. We have learned over this period of time, both in the West and more significantly in the organized markets in which we operate, not just the CAISO, but across the U.S., and we do have an operating facility, at least one and typically multiple, in every one of the organized markets in the U.S. We've really learned that that integration of variable generation, particularly wind and solar, renewable energy, is both perceived to be and is in truth a critical reliability and operational issue for the balancing authority areas and the grid operators. Integration costs are also a crucial economic driver, so integration is a very, very significant issue, and as the level of penetration of variable generation in a particular area increases, the reliability issues and the cost of integrating those renewable resources change, and the costs increase, and the reliability issues become more significant as more variable generation needs to be integrated. So it is a real issue. It's not one that, from our perspective, we should be in denial over, but it's rather one that we should be able to figure out how to address. And I can tell you from our parent company's experience in other countries, particularly in Europe, integration of variable renewable generation has occurred at very high levels of penetration. Our experience in Spain has been significant. There are days in Spain when wind power is providing well over 50% of all of the electricity across the whole country. And so if they can do it, why can't we? As we've thought about and acted on integrating variable generation here in the U.S., and as we've learned some lessons from our counterparts overseas, we've sort of figured that there is a set of things that can be done that go from the proverbial low-hanging fruit type activities to more elaborate and costly options as you progress with more and more penetration of renewable energy. So the first simplest, the lowest fruit on the vine, if you will, is just simply doing better forecasting. In the case of wind, that is trying to figure out not just how much the wind is going to blow, but also how it's going to ramp, how it is going to move up and down, because that is the key to successful integration of wind power, is being able to predict accurately when the wind is going to show up, yes, of course, but also when and how it is going to increase or decrease, because integration products and services are really a matter of moving other generation around to account for the variability. So better forecasting of the wind regimes is absolutely crucial. We've done a lot of that internally, and we've pushed for balancing authorities to do better forecasting, to invest in better forecasting tools in order to have a more accurate forecast, which then leads to lower integration costs, because the more accurate you are, the less contingency you need to have, and the fewer resources you need to hold in reserve in order to make up for differences in forecasts and therefore differences in wind generation schedules. As we've thought about this and worked through it, the next best thing on the scale after simply better forecasting is having more flexible markets for integration services. And this is where the EIM comes in. Having bigger, deeper, and more flexible markets in order to obtain imbalanced service primarily is absolutely crucial. And our experience in the other markets around the U.S. is that the cost of integrating wind generation is fractional compared with what it can be in smaller, more shallow markets. So that's why we think that moving toward an EIM or energy imbalance markets in the WEC is so important. We have done a small version of an energy imbalance market on our own with the help of the Bonneville Power Administration in the Bonneville BA area. We call it CSGI, or self-supply, in which it's a pilot program that the BPA allowed us to do starting several years ago, in which we are responsible as a company for procuring our own imbalance resources rather than having BPA provide them to us. So we are getting inking and decking resources from other generators in and around the Bonneville BA and we pay for those, we schedule those, and we work with a vendor to move those resources up and down in order to accommodate the variability in our own wind fleet. It's been a very successful pilot program for us. We have been able to achieve costs that are lower than the BPA imbalance tariff, or the variable rate tariff, and it has also candidly, I think, made Bonneville's job a little bit easier too, because they are now not responsible for being the entity that has to integrate the roughly 1,300 megawatts of Iberdrola Renewables wind generation that is in the footprint of its balancing authority area. So our self-supply initiative, our pilot program, has really been a great learning for us. It's been a lesson that having a market to go into to procure balancing resources can be beneficial and can lead to more efficient integration of renewable energy at lower cost, and while maintaining high levels of reliability. And over the several years that we've now done this in the Northwest, we've been able to deepen that market, drawing on more and more resources for imbalance service, which has had a salutary effect on driving down the cost of actually integrating these resources. So in a sense, it's a microcosm of what the EIM is attempting to do as it develops initially with CAISO and Pacific Corp, and then more broadly as the other BAs will join on. We think that just based on our own experiences, that the EIM that has been initiated by the CAISO and Pacific Corp and is now expanding should bring better opportunities for the affected areas and the affected BAs to integrate more renewable energy at better cost and at higher levels of penetration. And with that, I will stop and turn it over, I guess, to our hosts for us to all entertain questions.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Don and Rebecca. This is Amanda Orman. So we have a pretty significant amount of time to take some questions and have some dialogue. So what I'm going to ask Graham to do is unmute everyone's phones. So hopefully people don't have music playing in the background. But we'd like to be able to have a dialogue with folks. I don't see any hands raised on the webinar. So if you want to You had made a comment about that as more entities join the energy imbalance market, that the benefits to all go up as well. And I'm just wondering if you can drill into that a little bit for us. Like, I'm wondering if you have an HPS that's a very large new entrant, does that double the amount of transfer capability, or does it depend on the individual utility? Like, how do we know when someone joins how much it's going to benefit everybody?
Amanda, I presume this is Dawn Fuller. I presume that was directed to me.
It was,
the
yes.
line went blank here for a moment. I think first it's important to note that each of these 4 studies that have been done, as I go from the original Pacific Corp ISO study, then to Nevada Energy, then to NV Energy, then to Puget, then to Arizona, each of them has kind of built on the existing EIM platform. So I'll take that study was done. It looked at the ISO Pacific Corp footprint as operational, if you will, and then look what was the incremental benefit. And so it actually looked at what those incremental benefits were. Now, we may find cases, some balancing areas may find cases where muted. Okay.
I think you're okay. I can hear you.
I mean, we may find cases in these studies and other balancing areas may find cases where this benefit study doesn't, pan out for them. I mean, that's possible. My comment was really about the ones that have decided so far have in each case brought incremental benefits not only to their customers but to the rest of the EIM participants. That does not say that all 38 balancing areas will find benefit with the EIM. And that's one of the beauties, I think, if I could re-emphasize this topic of scalability, that it allows each entity to make their own decision on whether to join or not, and then when to join.
Okay. So can you comment on APS joining specifically and what they may have added to or what potential is there?
Yes, I can. And I would, just give me a second here. In the case of APS, their entire cost-benefit analysis is public. It's on their website, and I believe it's on our website, but in their filing that they made to their commission going back, I want to say 4 to 6 weeks ago, they provided a summary of their benefit study and also attached the entire study. And they, like many of all of the entities so far, looked at different scenarios, and what they, I think, called their base scenario showed an annual benefit of $11 million to their customers. There was a range of benefits that were reflected by the different scenarios, and I think that range was from 7 to maybe 18 million annually. But 11 million they picked as their base or best case, if you will, in terms of where they thought the right scenario was. And in the case of the APS study, I would also mention too, this 11 million reflects just benefits to their customers, and the benefits that were calculated for the rest of the EIM participants was around I think it was 3 to 6.5 million annually on top of this 11 million. So does that address your question, Amanda?
It does, but I was also thinking when you said about benefits to everyone, and it was a little hard to hear you because there was some background noise. There's certainly benefits to APS, but I'm wondering, now APS comes into the market, and now you have all this available transfer capability that wasn't there before. Do we have any idea what benefits it could pay to other folks, or maybe it doesn't?
Well, no, okay. Let me try again. That was my comment about the 3 to 6.5 million. It actually, okay. The study did look at not only the benefits to APS by them joining, but what were the benefits to the rest of the EIM participants for APS joining, and that was the 3 to 6.5 million that I mentioned.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Rebecca, with your transitional committee and what you're trying to do, I've been watching it closely, and it has been a really difficult task to try to figure out what does everybody need, what does everybody want. So I just wanted to know are there certain points that you've seen along the way where people have really fundamentally disagreed, or are you seeing that there's really general agreement and it's just tweaking around the edges how people think this governance structure should go forward?
So up until this point, and I think the way we structured ourselves and how we spent the first 6 months really immersing ourselves in understanding how other markets have structured governance, and just getting to know each other. I think all of us have built up a very strong level of mutual respect, and we all kind of knew generally through our guiding principles within the charter and ones that we've established within our own entity, and those are outlined throughout the initial issue paper, as well as I think highlighted in some respects in the straw proposal. We knew where we were headed, and so there has been no surprises. We will deeply and heartily debate issues, but I have not seen up until this point where there's a very huge issue or a disagreement. Most everything we may have differences of opinion on, but we've been able to talk through and work through it, and it's a helpful exercise to arrive at what we hope would be the best option. So it's been, in my professional experience, one of the best experiences I've had with working with a group with diverse backgrounds and perspectives. And we have differences of opinion, but we use those differences of opinion to come up with a concept that we think is well vetted and well considered.
Wow, great. Good to hear. We have a question from Ron Lair, so we're going to unmute Ron. Ron? Ron? Okay, I'm going to read Ron's question. It says, a couple of days ago, WEC's civil penalties for the Southwest outage were announced, and they're $16 million. Both SPP and MISO representatives have had their benefits, said their benefits were more about reliability than economics. Given the fines and penalties leveled against WEC and other entities, why aren't reliabilities of real-time grid awareness that EIM brings more discussed? Anybody want to throw open that a response?
This is Rebecca. I'll take a shot at that, and then from a regulator's perspective, I think if we look at the business case and first and foremost and the impact on our ratepayers, and then we know that reliability, because of more visibility and situational awareness, it's, for lack of a better term, the icing on the cake, is that we know that there are reliability benefits. I think they're hard to quantify. When you have a fine levied like that, it starts giving you the sense that, wow, there's some really real dollars behind it. So, I don't know. It's an important component, tough to quantify, but certainly part of the equation.
Don, any comments?
I should first say that I think Rebecca did great with that question.
Okay. Okay.
I think, I would add, and I agree with the comment that, just looking at EIM from a reliability standpoint, we do believe there's a reliability benefit because of the increased awareness across the balancing areas. PacifiCorp would now support that is very helpful to them in looking at their system now that they've been in operation for 6 months now. So it is a real benefit. We do talk about the reliability benefits. We talk about the situational awareness. We often refer to a paper that the FERC staff did a couple years ago that walked through the reliability benefits more from a qualitative standpoint, because it is difficult to try to quantify the reliability benefits. But we believe they're there, and PacifiCorp has confirmed that.
Yeah. since the numbers seem so much bigger, it'd be nice if they could be quantified as opposed to left just up in the air. So I have another question, and it's multi-part, so I'm going to read a couple at a time. Is there any effort to study or predict the impact of the EIM on the overall power market opportunities for each fuel type? And related to that, is there any breakdown of the type of generation offered by each participating utility?
Good luck with that, Don.
Thanks a lot. In each of the areas, we have, part of the production cost study process, if any of you have been involved in any of them, they're excruciatingly complicated. They look at all the details, they look at the existing resources in a particular balancing area or across the whole EIM area. And, it's, as we look at the more efficient dispatch, if you will, I think that it's, one of the things is that it starts to move gas-fired resources more efficiently, and I focus on gas-fired resources because they tend to be more flexible and more movable on a short-term, real-time basis. The other point that I mentioned earlier is I think that it's going to allow us to move renewable resources across multiple balancing areas in a way that we've been unable to do previously.
Great. And then there's a question on, with the Clean Power Plan and compliance by states, and especially multi-state compliance, do you think that the imminency of the Clean Power Plan is driving any additional activity towards the EIM? Are people going to join the EIM because they realize that it's going to help them with Clean Power Plan compliance?
Amanda, my answer to that is I don't have visibility that topic has driven specific entities toward EIM. It could be out there, but I have not seen it.
Okay. And a question for Kevin. Kevin, are there other services besides energy and balance market that you see as a developer that could be offered by CAISO or other kind of market services that would make your job easier? Do we have Kevin? Okay, maybe we don't have Kevin. Are there any last questions, or do the panelists have any questions of each other?
I don't have any tough questions for Rebecca or Kevin.
Yeah, you work with them too closely, right?
Yeah, I was trying to think of something really obscure and complicated for Dawn.
Bring it on.
I know, right. I can't.
Right. Well, speaking as an Arizonan, I'm very pleased to see APS joined. I followed their developments very closely, and I think they did kind of a model job in evaluating and looking at the regional studies and then doing their individual studies and, coming up with the decisions that they did. So we're excited to see them join. And I think that you're going to see so much change. And Rebecca, I think you've got your job cut out for you because, as you mentioned, CAISO or PacifiCorp is already thinking about joining the ISO, which totally upsets the apple cart. So you're going to have a challenge keeping up on all the changes that are going to happen.
Yeah, I'm very well aware of that, and it's, I've gone back and forth on the schedule, speed it up, slow it down, back and forth, but there's new dynamics. Every week it seems like there's something that's added to the equation. But I look at it as just, these are interesting times. We have not seen anything like this, in my opinion, in decades. So this is exciting, and challenging, and certainly, and I'm so thankful to such a fantastic transitional community, so hardworking and smart people with really good and different perspectives. So it was the right team was assembled for this, except for maybe me.
Good. Okay. And I just want to see if we've been able to unmute Kevin yet, and if he could answer that question. Kevin, are you there? Yeah, I think we're having some system issues on our side, not being able to unmute him. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I thank our presenters for coming on board to talk about this. We do have it recorded, which I think will be really nice to be able to let people go in and hear this presentation with the slides. I thank you for your time. We will take additional questions if anybody has them through the Four Corners Wind Resource Center. If you do, please send them to us and we'll get responses and send them back out. But thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thanks very much, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
Bye.